It's been a few months since I first heard someone talk about the Hollow Mile. I was at a gas station in British Columbia, and two guys were talking, half whispering, about a stretch of the Trans-Canada that no one knew where it started or ended, but that everyone had already crossed without realizing it. One of them said, "You only notice it after you've crossed it." I laughed at the time, thinking it was road talk. Until it happened to me, coming back from Kamloops on a freezing night. It was a typical stretch of road. Smooth asphalt, trees on both sides, a light fog. But something was bothering me. The dashboard had been showing the same mileage for more than 20 minutes. No GPS signal. And, strangely, the radio had started to crackle even though it was turned off. I tried to make a mental note of signs or landmarks, but there was nothing. No side entrances, no real curves. Everything was straight ahead, as if I were stuck in a poorly made loop of a road. The strangest thing was the time. When I entered that section, it was 11:40 p.m. I remember it well. But when I realized I had left, and I only realized it because the sounds of the road returned to normal, like the wind and the engine, the clock already showed 5:47 a.m. But the tank hadn't gone down even a bit. It was as if I had stopped, but was driving. I can't explain it. Everything seemed to be in place, until I looked at the dashboard. There was a plain, yellowed envelope with my name handwritten on it. In my own handwriting. I recognized it right away, the crooked lettering on the R, the slanted J. I opened it carefully, thinking it was some kind of joke. But it was a straightforward note: "You were there. Don't come back. Next time, you won't leave." That was it. No signature, nothing else. But the weirdest thing, it was from the shipping company where I had worked 10 years ago. And which has since gone bankrupt. I spent the next few days trying to find that stretch on the map. I went back the same way, checked stops, timed stretches. Nothing. Everything was normal. No empty place for so long, no signal was so long. But that night, everything had gone dead. No sound of wind, no birdsong, nothing. As if I had crossed a stretch of road that didn't exist to the world. And the worst part is that the more I thought about it, the more things I remembered, like the fact that I hadn't crossed a single car. Not a single soul. 4 hours. A friend of mine, who also drives that route, said he once noticed the same thing, a hole in the road, as if he had lost hours between one city and another. And when I told him about the letter, he froze. He said he also found one on the dashboard. But with a different message: "She's still there." He couldn't say who this she was, but it was clear that everyone gets a different message. And that other people have experienced this. What still gets me to this day is the detail of the note being written in my handwriting. That is no coincidence. I have been told that I wrote it myself and forgot about it. But how? There was no paper in the truck. And who could have stopped the vehicle, written the letter, left it there, without me noticing anything for more than 6 hours? Because that is what the clock said, 6 hours. That passed without me remembering a single second. And with the truck intact as I left it. One of the things that bothers me the most is the feeling. Not of fear, but of absence. When I think about that part of the road, it's like my head goes blank for a few seconds. Like that stretch of road took a piece of me. And every now and then, driving somewhere else, I feel the same thing, that opaque silence. And the radio, even when it's off, lets out a quick hiss. Just for a second. As if to say, almost again. Another detail: my wristwatch stopped working exactly at midnight. It didn't work anymore. It only started working again after I left the stretch, as if it had stopped with me. And when I went to open the compartment under the seat a few days later, I found another folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there before. It was the same color, same font. But with a different message: your time is only yours outside of here. I kept it to this day, but I confess that I'm thinking about burning it. I spoke to an old dispatcher, one of those guys who hears everything on the road. When I mentioned the Hollow Mile, he got serious. He said it's not just that area. There are slices of road that come and go, like gaps in the fabric of the world. Some call them dead zones. Others say they're bits of route that should have been erased, but got stuck in something that doesn't age. A kind of memory of the road. Or worse, a road that remembers whoever drove it. After that trip, I never drive alone in that area again at dawn. And even during the day, I keep an eye on the weather, the sound system, the radio, everything. Sometimes, for a second, the dashboard gets darker. Or the engine sounds like it's sputtering. And then I speed up, change course, do anything to get out of there. Because I know that if I fall into Hollow Mile again, I might not come back. Or maybe I'll come back with something that wasn't mine. And if anyone out there has ever felt like they've wasted hours on a road that should have lasted minutes, here's a warning: pay attention to the clock. And if you find a letter with your name, in your handwriting, don't read it out loud. They might hear it. Whoever, or whatever, is waiting inside. I've driven all over the UK, but Scotland has a kind of silence that you won't find anywhere else. That road between Inverness and Ullapool, for example, cuts through parts of the Highlands that seem forgotten in time. Just scrubland, hills, and fog. And that's exactly where I saw him for the first time. It was early, about 3 in the morning. A heavy fog engulfed everything, and a strange, unusual cold, a cold that seemed to go straight to the bone. Visibility was terrible. I was driving slowly, scanning the road with my low beams, trying to spot any animals or obstacles. That's when I saw the silhouette. Standing on the shoulder. Tall. Motionless. I thought it was someone waiting for help, maybe a shepherd or a lost hiker. But as I got closer, I saw the eyes. They weren't glowing. They were white. Completely. And yet, they seemed to be following me as I passed. The weirdest thing is that, right after I passed it, I felt a strange pressure in the truck. As if something weighed more. The steering wheel became stiffer, the back felt a little unstable, as if there were people or extra weight there. I looked in the mirrors, of course. Nothing. But the fog seemed to have entered the truck. Seriously. The smell, the cold, even the feeling on my neck, like when someone is watching you closely. And the side window started to get wet on the inside. At the next stop, I tried to forget about it. I had coffee, washed my face, and even laughed to myself, saying it was just sleep. But when I went to open the trunk door, just to check if everything was okay with the cargo, the inside was damp. As if the fog had gotten in there too. And the canvas was marked. With fingers. Long ones. In a straight line. It wasn't dirt, it was like the condensed steam had drawn that on the inside. I continued the journey, trying to ignore everything, but the sensation remained. The strange weight, the denser silence, and the fog that wouldn't diminish. It seemed to follow me, even when other parts of the road should have been clear. Even the radio started to fail, it didn't crackle, it just disappeared. It went silent, dry. As if the sound had been ripped out of the air. And at a certain point, the headlights began to reflect something that wasn't on the road. As if there was a shadow outside the beam of light. Something tall, following, close to the bushes. I started to get really nervous when I saw him again. Up ahead. On the same side of the road. Only this time, closer to the crosswalk. He looked the same, absurdly tall, too thin, his eyes staring blankly. But I couldn't see his face. It was like the fog had molded the shape, and the eyes were the only solid features. This time, I almost stopped. Seriously. My foot almost touched the brake. But part of me knew, if I stopped, he would get in. So I floored it. I drove straight past. And for a moment, I swear, the truck felt lighter. As if it had lowered itself. As if it had given up. But it didn't last long. The radio, which had been silent, crackled. And for a second, I heard my voice. But I didn't say anything. It was my voice. I only said one word, "Go back." That was it. And the rearview mirror, which had been clean until then, started to fog up on the inside. Pure humidity. Just like the window in the cab. I arrived at my destination with an unreasonable delay. The GPS showed that I should have arrived an hour earlier. The cargo was intact, but the dock staff commented that my truck smelled strange. Like wet grass with rust. And at the end of the invoice, someone had scribbled in blue pen, "Still watching." But no one there uses blue pens. I asked. And the strangest thing, it was my handwriting. Again. After that, I avoided that route for weeks. But then the nightmares started. Always the same scene, me driving in total darkness, and only seeing the white eyes in the rearview mirror. Nothing else. No face. No voice. Just the eyes, shining in the fog. And me, stuck in an endless loop of curves, with the dashboard frozen at 3:03. Always that time. When I saw that on my real clock one night too, even though I wasn't dreaming, I almost abandoned the truck on the road. I started asking around. Other drivers have seen it too. Each one describes it differently, but the pattern is the same: high humidity, strange weight on the truck, white eyes. Some say that if you stop, it gets in and doesn't come out again. One guy said he lost his brother on this road, and that the truck was found with the engine running, but empty. And that the passenger seat had thin finger marks dug into the leather. The part that makes me shudder the most is that sometimes, out of nowhere, even on dry roads, the right-hand side window starts to sweat. Just in that spot. And sometimes shapes appear, like soft scratches, as if someone wanted to open the window from the inside. I've replaced the window, the rubber, even the door. And it still happens. I never tell anyone when I'm driving with a friend. But I know. It still appears. When it's foggy, especially. When it's too quiet. And now there's something new. Every time I drive past dense fog, no matter the country, my left side mirror fails. It goes dark. And then goes back to normal after a few minutes. I've had it replaced twice. And the other day, while I was cleaning the cabin, I found a fingerprint on the dashboard. Long, thin. White. Like someone had pressed it from the inside out. And I swear, I felt the truck get heavier again. Just like that night. Only now, it didn't go away. The Australian outback has a heavy silence. Anyone who has never driven alone for hours in the outback doesn't understand. It's all very flat, dry, endless. You enter a kind of trance. On this particular trip, I was carrying a light load from Alice Springs to an isolated station in the Northern Territory. It was night, clear skies, no signal from anything, cell phone mute, radio silent, just the sound of the engine. Until I tried the horn, I don't know why. Boredom, maybe. That's when the echo answered. It wasn't a normal echo. It wasn't the sound of the horn coming back distorted. It was a voice. Faint, scratchy, like it was coming from inside a rock. It said, "You should not have returned." At first I thought it was radio interference, some kind of interference. But there were no towers nearby. I tried to honk again. And another phrase came, muffled but clear, "We remember thee." That stopped me. That way of speaking, that "thee," it was like Old English, almost biblical. I was kind of paralyzed, wondering if I should stop or speed up. But I kept going, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was the wind, an acoustic trick of the rock formations. But there were no hills or cliffs. Just dry plains. And even so, the sound came back with complete messages. I tried it again, this time I shouted my name out the window. I waited. About 5 seconds later, it came back, "He hath spoken." A chill ran down my spine. My name didn't come back. But the answer came as if someone had heard it. After that, the dashboard went black for 2 seconds. Brief, but real. Everything reset, speedometer, RPM, even the headlights flickered. As if the truck had jumped out of reality and come back. In the meantime, I heard another sound. Deeper. Like a groan coming from the road itself. It wasn't from the truck, nor from the wind. It was from the ground. As if something was dragging itself right below me, echoing as if it had its own response. I tried to stay calm, I turned on the radio just to break the silence, but it didn't pick up anything. Just static. Even so, I left it on. Any noise was better than that dry echo responding. But then, even with the radio crackling, I heard a laugh. In the background. Deep, as if someone very old had found me funny. And then the voice came again, this time clearer, without me saying anything first, "Thou knowest the path." I had never heard that word in my life, knowest. But I understood. And I was afraid that I had understood. I decided to stop the truck. Not because I was afraid, but because I felt like the tires were getting heavier with every kilometer. The sand seemed to be pulling. I got out and listened. Nothing. Total silence. But when I closed the cabin door, I heard the same voice, only now, from inside. It said, "He leaveth the vessel. The mark remaineth." I got goosebumps right away. I went back quickly, but of course there was no one inside. Except that my seat was further back than I had left it. And the seatbelt was tight, as if someone had been sitting there. I drove off again, accelerating without thinking. About 20 minutes later, I started seeing things in the headlights. Not definite shapes, shadows, blurs, as if the light was passing through something that shouldn't be there. And the scariest part, the shadows weren't outside, they were on the hood. As if something very light had brushed against it and left a heat mark. Every time I looked away and back, the position changed. As if it was moving when I wasn't looking. The radio came on again for a second. And it broadcast the phrase, "He rideth still." At this point, I had already decided to end the trip. There was not much left, but I was panicking. My body was sweating even with the freezing air. And then, for the last time, I honked. Without thinking. Reflexively. The echo came back, only now with a different voice. Mine. It repeated what I had said earlier in the night, "Just one more delivery, then I'll stop." In Portuguese. Very clear. The road opened up ahead, but it seemed like the sound was holding me back. The last half hour was like being in another world. The road didn't seem to change, even though the truck was traveling at a constant speed. The stars were in the same place. And every sound I made, the brakes, the gears shifting, even my breathing, was answered. And always with that old tone. One phrase kept repeating itself more than the others: the dust remembers. The dust remembered. It stuck in my head like a threat. When I finally saw the entrance to the destination station, I breathed a sigh of relief. But before I got off, I heard a noise behind the cabin. It was like someone knocking with a closed fist, 3 times. I didn't think, I just got off. I circled the truck with my flashlight, gun cocked, ready for anything. But nothing. Except the footprints in the dust were the wrong way around. As if someone had walked backwards, from my door to the back. And they were lighter than mine. Almost childish. I delivered the load as if nothing had happened. The guys at the warehouse noticed my condition, of course. One of them asked if I had passed through Echo Stretch, as they call that stretch of road. When I confirmed, he simply said, "They always talk to the ones who come back." And he walked away. I didn't understand the "come back," because it was my first time there. At least, that's what I thought. Until I opened the glove compartment and found a receipt from the same station, with my signature, dated 3 years ago. Since then, I've avoided the center of the country. But sometimes, when it's too quiet, my radio crackles. Just once. And then a soft voice says, "We have not finished." As if there's still something to be said. As if I've returned to a place I've never left. As if this dry, deserted part of the world remembers me better than I remember myself. I was driving late that night, cutting through Nebraska on a back road I'd never taken before. It was almost midnight, and I was already feeling tired. There was no radio, nothing around, just an old-fashioned sign that said, "Rest Stop, 2 miles." Oddly enough, it hadn't shown up on my GPS or the map in my onboard system. But I was getting tired, so I followed the signs. When I got there, it was an old-fashioned gas station, a red pump, a diner with a neon sign, and even a jukebox in the corner of the window. The place was all lit up, but there were no cars, trucks, or vans around. Just mine. I parked, got out, and the first thing that struck me was how quiet it was. No bugs, no road noise. I walked into the diner, and it looked like it had stepped straight out of the 1950s, a Formica counter, a waitress in a blue uniform and white apron, a menu with absurdly low prices. She smiled and said, "Good evening, Hank. Black coffee as usual?" But the problem is, my name is Hank. And I've never been there. I stood there frozen for a few seconds. I asked her how she knew my name, and she just laughed, as if I had told an old joke. The jukebox started playing a song I remembered from my childhood, one my mother had heard on old tapes. I sat down at the counter, a bit stiff, and the smell of coffee was so familiar it made me nauseous. The attendant served me before I could even ask. And the other 2 employees, one who looked like a gas station attendant and the other dressed like a newspaper delivery boy, also greeted me by name. I started to think it was a prank or some kind of act. But there were no cameras, no other customers, and the TV in the corner was broadcasting a black and white report about the launch of Sputnik, as if it were 1957 in that place. I went outside to check on the truck. Everything seemed to be in place, but the GPS wasn't working and the clock on the dashboard was still stuck at 12 o'clock. When I looked back at the station, the door was closed, and through the window, all 3 employees were looking at me at the same time. I walked back slowly, not knowing whether to insist or leave for good. When I put my hand on the doorknob, the door opened by itself with a bell clink. The waitress was at the counter, smiling as if nothing had happened. This time, I noticed that she was holding a folded photo, one of those old black and white ones. When I went to approach her, she put it in her apron pocket. I sat down again, trying to figure out what the hell that was. And that's when I noticed something. there was a frame on the wall with my face in it. Young. As if I had worked there. I ordered coffee again, this time trying to stay calm. She served it to me as if everything was normal. She said, "We were worried when you didn't come back in the summer of '62. I froze immediately. I was born in 1982. I joked that she must be confusing me with another Hank. All she said was, "You may have left, but part of you stayed." Just as she said that, the lights in the room flickered. And the jukebox repeated the chorus of the same song, on loop. As if time had gotten stuck. I decided to get up and leave anyway. When I opened the door again, the truck looked different. Covered in dust, as if it had been parked for years. The dashboard was all faded, and the left side mirror was cracked. I got in, tried to start it, and to my surprise, the engine started. But the radio turned on at the same time, even though it had been turned off before, and a familiar voice came out. It was mine. Young. Laughing. As if she was telling a joke. I looked in the mirror and for a second, I swear I saw the waitress sitting in the back seat. I drove on without looking back. The lights at the gas station dimmed until they were gone, as if swallowed by the darkness. I didn't see any movement on the road again until about 20 minutes later, when I passed another truck. When I asked over the radio if he'd seen the rest stop, the guy laughed and said, "What? Ain't been around here for 80 miles, mate." I arrived at a real gas station at 2 a.m. On the bathroom wall, scrawled on the back of the door, was written in black marker, "She still serves coffee at midnight." The next day, I asked 2 local truck drivers if they knew of any old gas stations in the area. One of them stopped working on his sandwich and said, "I've heard of the place. It only shows up for people who are too tired to go on." Another mentioned that a guy named Hank had disappeared in the 1960s and was never seen again. I laughed nervously, saying it was just a coincidence, but deep down something was burning inside. It was the kind of thing you never forget, even if you try to convince yourself it was a dream. I spent days thinking about it. I searched through old photos, highway archives, and even ended up on an obscure forum for retired truckers. One of them responded with a picture, the facade of the same gas station, with the date, 1961, written underneath. It was exactly the same. Same sign, same gas pump, same jukebox window. I messaged him to ask where it was. All he replied was, "If you saw it, it's because they remember you." After that, he never went online again. Since that night, I have never been able to sleep soundly while traveling. Sometimes, when I pass midnight on the highway, I see a blue light in the rearview mirror. A sign flashing. And I immediately turn off the radio, afraid of hearing my own name again. I have not taken that route again since. But the worst thing is that I still remember the taste of that coffee. It was exactly what my mother used to make. I don't know what that was. A place out of time? A kind of limbo for those who've almost given up on the road? All I know is that that gas station shouldn't exist. And if one day, out of nowhere, you see a sign indicating a rest stop at midnight, just drive straight on. Because if you go in, maybe they'll recognize you too. I've never been much of a believer in road stories, but there's one thing I experienced in the interior of Wales that still keeps me awake at dawn. I was driving a quiet route between Swansea and Bangor, delivering industrial parts. It was a cloudy day, the road was wet, everything was a bit gray. At one point, I took a secondary road, very narrow, with vegetation on both sides, almost forming a natural tunnel. That's when it happened. At the end of the bend, I saw a truck coming in the opposite direction. The same model as mine. From a distance, I thought it was just a coincidence. But as it got closer, I started to notice the details, the faded paint, the crack in the windshield, the old Union sticker on the corner of the bumper. Everything was the same. Identical. When I noticed the license plate number, I almost stopped in my tracks. It was the same. Letter for letter, number for number. My heart started beating faster, and I could only keep my hands steady on the steering wheel because I was moving. We passed each other slowly, almost in slow motion. And that's when I saw the driver. It was me. Same face, same cap, same worn jacket. He looked straight at me and waved with a calm, almost ironic gesture, as if he already knew I was in shock. The worst part? I waved back. I don't know why. Reflex, maybe. But the moment our eyes met, I had a horrible feeling, like some part of me had been left behind in that moment. Like I'd switched places with something that looked like me. After that, I didn't see the other truck in my mirror anymore. It didn't turn, it didn't disappear into the distance, it didn't disappear around the bend. It was as if it had never been there. I parked in a recess in the road, got out, trembling, and looked at my truck's license plate. It was still the same. But when I got to the cab door to get back in, it was already unlocked. And I always lock it when I get out. Always. I entered the cabin slowly, as if I expected to find someone there. There was no one there, of course, but the air was different. Colder. And it smelled strange, like scrap metal mixed with damp mold. I quickly started the engine and continued on my way, trying not to think too much. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. The road was still empty, and for a good 40 minutes I didn't pass another car. Just bushes and thin fog. The radio made a loud hiss and turned on by itself, even though it was off. It played an old song, one that my grandfather used to listen to, and that I hadn't heard in decades. I thought it was an electrical problem, but things were starting to get out of hand. When I arrived in a small village, I stopped at a gas station to fill up and check the truck's documents. And that's when I got a chill down my spine. The annual inspection papers had an issue date for the next day. As if that truck had come back from the future. Or, as if it wasn't the same truck I'd driven that morning. I walked over to the driver's side mirror and began to take in the details. That dent in the front fender that I had gotten months ago? It was still there. But underneath, something new, a small white mark, as if someone had scratched it with a fingernail. I looked closer and realized they were letters. A name. My name. Spelled backwards. I paused for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. It didn't make any sense. But it was no coincidence. Someone, or something, was messing with me, using my own image, my own vehicle. The next night, while sleeping in the cab of a service station in Wrexham, I woke up to the sound of an engine. I looked out the side window and saw the same model of truck, same dirt pattern, same cracked windshield, slowly driving across the yard. Only this time, the me who was driving didn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the road and disappeared into the darkness. The detail that destroyed me, in the passenger seat, there was someone with a flashlight pointed at my truck. Since then, I haven't been able to drive at night without checking my rear-view mirror at every turn. It's been 4 months now, and every week someone asks me if I've been to such and such a city at such and such a time, when I've never even been anywhere near it. There was a guy in Cardiff who swore he saw me on a country road, waving from the back of the car. But at the time I was unloading in Swansea, signed note and everything. The duplicate, or whatever it is, keeps turning up. And with each report, it seems more confident. More daring. I tried to track the other truck through toll cameras, but no footage showed 2 identical vehicles at the same time. Even at the points where the other me and I would have crossed paths. It was as if he was using the same routes, but for a different time. Or a parallel space, I don't know. I started thinking about selling the truck. But every time I thought about it, something went wrong, as if he knew. As if he didn't want me to get off the route. The weirdest thing happened 2 weeks ago. I got a traffic ticket in my name, issued in a city I've never been to. In the radar image, it was my truck. My face. But the sticker on the window was torn, and the side mirror was broken, just like it was after an accident that hasn't happened to me yet. That's when I realized he's not just repeating it. He's anticipating it. Living before me. Or replacing me, little by little. I know it sounds crazy. But if you're ever driving through the UK countryside and see a truck that looks exactly like yours coming the other way, don't wave. Don't even look the driver in the eye. Because if it's you, maybe they don't want to be just a reflection anymore.